Hey, it's Tyler again. The video I made on European martial arts as it confers to tabletop RPGs was really successful. I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it, so I'm here making another one of those on why martial arts is usually even crunchier than crunchy systems, and so you have to role play in order to make um, the gameplay fade into the back or to make the gameplay make sense because very often GMs don't have, again, like I mentioned in the last video, this background of martial arts experience to describe things in a compelling way. Mm, there were three main things I talked about. I started this video and then I heard my neighbors yelling and it distracted me, and then a firefly flew across my room and that distracted me again. So it just ended up rambling and I ended up repeating myself a lot. No promises that won't happen here, but it will hopefully happen less. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, as I lean away from the mic and probably make that sound terrible, I'm new to this YouTuber thing, uh, reach weapons. Well, in most D20 games, the staff has no reach. Now, think about that for a minute. Your fists have no reach. Well, me right here, that's no reach. I can hit someone a 5 foot square over. That in of itself, I'm moving around in that 5 foot square. My opponent's moving around in their 5 foot square. And we're sort of, if you like to think of it, sharing a general 10 foot square area, a 10 foot by 5 foot area. You have to think of two people fighting first, and then think, for the purposes of the game making sense, these are the confines, right? Because if you think of it as these two people are in a 10 foot by 5 foot rectangle first, and then think they are fighting, it's gonna be dumb. It won't. It's not conducive to roleplay. Things that are dumb and not conducive to roleplay, though, beyond that explanation are. I mean, look at. I can draw this my entire body length over here and still can't even get it into frame, and this confers me no reach advantage. That's silly, right? And you could say, oh, well, what if it's for balance? What if you change this? There's going to be roving bands of monks and wizards hitting people from a mile away, and no. One, monks already have access to reach weapons, and two, wizards have the lowest base attack bonus in the game. I don't think it's gonna. It hasn't killed it in my game to add reach to staves. So that's fine. Let's bring it down closer. Let's zoom in though. As I put the staff away. If you get a staff, it's a great joy figuring out how you can transport them because they don't fit in a lot of smaller cars. Okay. Here we go. Oh, this is much smaller. This is a one-handed sword. Of course it doesn't have reach. I don't know. It reaches quite a lot longer than my arm. So here I'm at an equal advantage as far as reach goes. I don't know. I feel like I would be cut quite a few times by a heavy sword before I manage to do much of anything. So how do we fix that? Well, one side, you could incorporate a short range, medium range, long range, but then we have the 5 foot, 10 foot, 15 foot increments, and there are occasionally weapons like that, like the whip, that have a 15 foot range. But do you really want to get that granular with everything? Probably not, since most people already have the issue of Pathfinders and D20 systems combat taking too long. So what can we do about that? Well, maybe this adds to your player character's initiative if they're specifically in that tiny, tight space where you are exactly this sword length away and you're going to get the first strike on them no matter what. Or maybe it's a little simpler. Maybe you just automatically give them a first strike against a person that's not ready for combat. So you give them a surprise round just for having the longer weapon. Maybe on the flip side of that, you give them a disadvantage for having to draw this big long weapon here, and the other person draws their weapon quite quickly, and that's where the similar reach comes into play. You're sitting here fiddling around with this for a little longer, they've already drawn their weapon and they're walking towards you. That's how they come up to the same reach. Again, it comes with the flavor and the description first, and then the fact that they're the same reach. That way, you don't have players sitting there, hopefully silently, going, wait a minute, I'm in Mortal Kombat, sort of fencing a dude with his bare hands. You know, he's not a monk. I've just picked a fight with some tavern dude. Just, you know, he's bare knuckle boxing me, and I hit him with my sword that's 4 feet long, and then he punches me in the face right back. What the hell? What's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. Right. So it's very important to give automatic successes and remember that they don't have a thing that does a D8 damage and it's slashing and it's in the heavy swords group. They have a sword. They have a lethal weapon in their hands. Likewise, speaking of the swords groups, there are some things that are just like dumb the longer you think about them. In the case of like 5 seconds. Okay, weapon specialization. You pick an weapon and you get a +1 to hit with it, or a +1 to damage. I can't remember. Weapon focus is +1 to hit. Weapon specialization is +1 to damage. Either way, you pick one weapon. Okay, I'm going to pick saber. I have a +1 to hit with it because I'm well trained, or I've just used it a lot, or it was the preferred weapon of my family. We fight with this sabers for generations. Yeah, and maybe I have some special technique that's not normally taught. Whatever. Oh, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I can't possibly do literally just the same things because it's smaller, it's different. It only does a D6 when that does a D8. You think I get a +1 to hit with this? No. It doesn't make sense. And we already have weapon groups in Pathfinder, so again, another pretty easy change to that is just instead of picking a weapon, pick a weapon group. And you have a +1 to hit with all of those. Because someone who's a trained martial artist, especially with weapons, they can pick up any weapon and pretty much be solid. You can use the same techniques with it. Hell, you can even, if you're mostly trained with a longsword and you pick up a staff, you can use the longsword techniques with a staff. It won't be as effective, but that's sort of the representation of, you know, the fighter getting all martial weapons. Staff's a simple weapon, but they're trained with pretty much every weapon, right? Likewise, there's the exotic weapons, and it's like, you have to take exotic weapon proficiency with this particular weapon, and it's like, why not take exotic weapon proficiency with the weapon group? So, you know, there's some weird stuff in there, right? Like, it wouldn't make sense for somebody who knows how to use a bow to know how to use a firearm immediately, or vice versa, especially. Fine. That's perfectly fine. But there's some stuff where it's like the elven curved blade. Ooh, you know how to swing this around, but not the elven curved blade. And just because you know how to swing the elven curved blade doesn't mean you know how to swing a katana. Oh no. Like, it gets to these silly levels of granularity that just aren't real. It's more crunchy than it needs to be, actually. So, they don't fit the immersion, they don't fit the roleplay, toss them by the wayside. Likewise, weapons provide no armor class. Ooh, this is a tricky one. This is one that highlights the you must use roleplay first, then add the mechanics, because the lowest armor class item in the game in most D20 systems, Pathfinder 3.5, I believe AD&D, not a role-playing game, but Mordheim, let's add that. A buckler, a little small shield. This obviously adds a lot more protection than this. But, are you telling me this gives me no protection compared to my fists? When given the option of blocking this with this sword, hiya, you have not been slashed to death. Or turtling up in a shell gun. Yeah. Ow. I wouldn't do this. So how do we fix that? Well, the buckler adds 1 AC. we can't have this add 1 AC, otherwise everyone would just be dual wielding and nobody would use a buckler. Well, if we buff the buckler, then everybody's ACs go way high because we have to buff everything else, and we have AC inflation. And yeah, don't be the Federal Reserve when it comes to the AC in your games. Oh man. So what can we do? Well, you're unarmed. You're not a monk. I don't need to roll to hit you. What are you gonna do? Realistically, what could you possibly do as a man-sized target? Unless you're full sprinting away, if you're sitting in a square, just kind of weaving and dodging, one of those is going to hit you. It's going to do damage. So you can, again, use roleplay, give automatic successes. Someone who's unarmed and isn't a monk and has supernaturally tough skin or whatever, yeah, you're going to hit them. They don't have a way to meaningfully defend themselves. One of the reasons that weapons are nice is that even if your opponent defends themselves, you still do damage to them. That's kind of the point. Yeah, well, that's the point, actually. Stupid. Again, it's also got this nice little nagel here to block things, twist, manipulate things offline, and to stop yourself from getting stuck in your opponent by sliding your hand all the way up and losing your dagger. That helps you prevent from getting disarmed a little bit. There's that. With an axe, of course, we can hook. So maybe you give your axe the disarm quality because your player's describing how he's hooking the opponent's weapon away, or he's hooking around the opponent's shield to hit the opponent's face. So you make it easier. You give them a bonus to hit because of how they're describing like that. Their axe just does slashing damage. It doesn't have blunt, but they flip around and hit them with the blunt end to do blunt damage. Ooh, well, you have to take a feat to do that, actually. It's called Versatile Strike. If that player's at your table and they're interrupting combat like that, tell them not to do that. And if it's a recurring problem, that you have a rules lawyer that's just there to play a board game and remind everyone that we're playing a board game and you want to roleplay, kick them to the curb. Because for me, you don't need to take a feat to be able to go, I didn't do anything. Let me try the other end. Trial and error is like the most basic human instinct, right? So reward your players for being creative in combat. It'll make your combat a lot more fun and go by a lot more quick. Hey, we're fighting some guy in plate, and it's been like 2 rounds of combat, and you're just like, oh my god, nobody can hit him. Don't have those nightmarish hour-long combat where the combat's effectively over, but everyone's just sort of sitting there like that scene out of JoJo Part 4, like, just trying to stomp this dude in plate armor to death, and they just like, we just can't hit him, DM. That's just stupid, and it takes forever. It's funny if that happens for a few rounds, it's funny. If it's happening for an hour, it's exhausting. So, yeah, maybe you could just go, boom, all right, you've halved this guy's armor. Let people use weapons for but the balance, everyone in plate's just going to run around getting demolished by people with maces. Okay. And? And is kind of my response there. Yeah, sure. Maybe make armor actually useful against firearms if you use firearms and allow gunslingers, because early armor was useful against firearms. That's why firearms weren't widely adopted until 150, 200 years after they were invented. One of the reasons, obviously, reliability is the other one, but that's well represented in most games that include firearms. Everything has to have a weakness, otherwise it's just boring. You can't have your players, trying to win the game. Again, okay, well, now there's this role-played downside of plate armor that isn't written into the game. What are some unwritten upsides of plate armor? You can roll down a hill full of brambles and not take any damage. You can be tossed off a cliff and just... your acrobatic score is -5 because you're in full plate and carrying 100 pounds of gear. It doesn't matter. You don't take any damage from rolling down a cliff. Now, of course, if you're dropped a 50-foot free fall, that's gonna friggin' hurt. You're gonna break all the bones in your body, maybe live if your cleric's nearby, but you know. So there are hidden upsides and hidden downsides to everything, and you just have to be role-playing them. Both player, try to use your items and things creatively, and GM, to let your players have nice things. You know, maybe this doesn't add any AC when we're in combat, right? This doesn't give me any defensive bonus while I am in active combat with another person. Okay, fine. But maybe I'm sitting here, my weapon's not readily drawn, an assassin attacks me. I didn't make my perception check to see him, but the GM says, you know, just out of the glint of your eye, you see a steel flash before you. Right before it plunges, you may make... He's giving you your one last chance. He's rolled a bunch of crappy dice behind the scenes. It's just like, oh man, I'm about to kill this guy with something he hasn't even seen. Let's give him something. Okay, you can roll an acrobatics check or a sleight of hand check or whatever to do something out there. Or maybe, you as the player go, I'm going to try something. I'm not just going to sit here and accept my fate and be stabbed. Hopefully that's the situation, right? And you as a GM don't have to prompt that. But, whereas if you have something like this, boom, maybe you're already drawn. Maybe you're already drawn and ready to knife fight that guy. If you're a wizard and you decided not to have a weapon, well, I hope you have a spell that works because, oh yeah, you noticed this assassin going to stab you. His knife's already drawn. The knife is already mid-plunge. Well, maybe you live, but your hands are now crippled, so you can't cast any spells with somatic components until they get healed. Things like that, right? That's just off the top of my head. You don't have to overcomplicate crunchy systems by staring at 1d4 piercing damage. This is a dagger, and it can't do slashing damage via Pathfinder's rules. You're telling me that's nothing? I'm not doing anything to you here? No slashing damage? No, of course it can do slashing damage. It can't do any blunt damage? Really? Really? It can't do any blunt damage? It entirely depends on how your players are role-playing, and the stats are there to give you some ideas, right? They're to give you a baseline of, well, okay, if this can do a d4 piercing damage, maybe it should do a d3 slashing damage. Well, if your fists do a D3, non-lethal damage, well, that should definitely do a D3 lethal damage, right? You've just made a harder fist, effectively. I probably got a lot more rambling that I could do about that. Let me know if you would like to hear more rambling about that. But yeah, the too long didn't watch, I suppose, is use roleplay first, and then use the crunch of the system to make it easier for you to make rulings on the fly. I hope that's helpful. I hope you liked it. As always, tell me if you have any ideas on this, any cool combat scenes that you've described similarly, just using the logic of the weapons and not even necessarily the rules. And let me know if you'd like to see more videos similar to this one. Thanks, and I'm going to hunt for the stop recording button now.